Richard Davis and his 62-year-old mother, Miranda, had been living alone on a small farm outside St. Francisville for more than 10 years. They had been alone all that time because of the untimely death of Richard's wife, who died trying to give birth to what would have been their first child. After his wife's death, Davis decided to live a solitary life with his mother on the family farm, where he had grown up and was cared for by his father until the day he died. Love and the idea of one day becoming the father of his own family were relegated to the past, and his only goal in life during all those years was to take care of his mother and to make the business prosper, which since his father's death had been neglected and was on the verge of ruin. In addition, it is important to mention that the Davis family was black. Richard's grandparents were originally from Africa and arrived in the United States with barely $100 in their pockets. While this condition should not mean anything nowadays, years ago it made them the target of all eyes and made them much more susceptible to any kind of aggression, both inside and outside the workplace. However, neither Richard's grandparents nor his father were intimidated by American racism and fought to carry out their dream and lead a peaceful life in one of the quietest towns in the state of Louisiana. But this whole story is not about the Davises' farm and their struggle against racism in the United States, but about how this farmer, who had decided to close his heart forever, found himself involved in a touching story that we are sure you will be moved by. A story that begins with the suspicious arrival of 6 sextuplet 9-year-old sisters at the town orphanage, and how their lives and that of our gentle farmer would change forever from that moment on. It all started when the municipal orphanage requested the florist services of the Davises' farm. In the plan to restructure the family business, Richard decided to invest part of the farm to grow flowers and offer florist services throughout the city in order to increase his income. It was a strategy that really worked, and it meant that the farm was no longer dependent on cattle and wheat. And in turn, David once again felt useful and excited about something: gardening. Flowers and plants wouldn't be the only new and exciting thing Richard would introduce into his life recently, though. On going to the orphanage to talk to their director about the various floral arrangements they would need for the coming week for the visit of their main sponsors, Richard was confronted with an unpleasant and sad scene that broke his heart. 6 girls, physically the same but dressed differently, crestfallen, entered one of the rooms, followed by one of the center's monitors, while what must have been their parents reproached them with all kinds of things that Davis could not understand. But he didn't need to hear what the couple was explaining with great indignation to the monitor. It was evident that they didn't love them, and that these girls were really sad and in urgent need of affection. An affection that it was impossible that people like those, well-dressed and arrogant, could give them. At the sight of them, Richard stopped listening to the director's flower arrangement directions and became lost in his own thoughts. He didn't know why, but at the sight of those poor girls, his heart was stirred, and he felt an innate urge to help them and end the loneliness they must be feeling. "Who are they?" he asked the director, interrupting his rant about flowers. The director looked at him, annoyed for interrupting him, and answered reluctantly, telling him quickly and concisely the sad story surrounding those 6 sisters. It turned out that this was the 9th orphanage to which the girls had returned, and in just 1 month they had already been returned to the center by their new guardians in a very bad way. Since they became orphans, the sisters have not stopped going back and forth to different orphanages in the state, but the result was always the same. The girls were not able to adapt to their new families, or, in the worst case, the families were not as suitable as they would have seemed at first. Among us, they are better known as the Cursed 6. They have been going from one orphanage to another for years, and every time they return, they do so with a scandal behind them. It's a pity, but we can do no more for them. They are quite problematic, because although we have tried several times, they refuse to separate and to be adopted individually, which would make things easier. It is very complicated for someone to want to adopt 6 sisters at the same time, as you can understand," the director explained without paying too much attention to them. It was evident that the girls did not matter much to him, and that his main interest in Mr. Davis was his professional services. Probably because of this, when Richard decided to continue talking about the sextuplets and again ignore his flower proposals, the director began to become unhinged and regret having explained anything about the 6 sisters. "And are they cursed? It just seems to me that they need a family that understands them and gives them space to trust people again," said Davis, looking pityingly at the girls who had all sat together in silence at one end of the room. "Oh, of course they're not cursed. It's a joke. They are just different, that's all. The first orphanage that took them in housed them for 1.5 years, and that has been the longest period they have spent in an orphanage. When they arrived there, the girls had been frightened and had shown signs of post-traumatic stress disorder, so they had to undergo child therapy for a few months before they started talking, playing freely, and interacting with other children. Only then did they dare to start the process of adopting the girls. But things got complicated again when someone tried to adopt them separately. They became angry and refused to eat. It was impossible. However, when they finally found families who agreed to take in all 6 of them, things didn't get any better either," explained the director in a gloomy voice. "Were they mistreated?" asked Davis in alarm, fearing what the director was going to tell him. The director remained silent for a few seconds, and then went on to tell him something that did not succeed in calming him down. Quite the contrary. "If they had only been mistreated, their case could be considered manageable, but they have endured far worse from their adoptive families. There was indeed a very serious case of domestic violence. In fact, the couple was arrested and is currently serving time in jail. However, these 6 sisters have been suffering for so long that physical pain is no longer their greatest fear." However, when Davis returned to the farm and got back to work, he couldn't get those girls out of his mind for a second. At night, he could not stop thinking about what the director had explained to him, and the sad, pale faces of those 6 sisters appeared to him like ghosts every time he closed his eyes and tried to sleep. It was then when he made an unforeseen decision that would change his life completely, and he was not aware of the extent to which it would do so. When Richard announced his intention to adopt sextuplets to his mother, Miranda, the next morning, she couldn't believe his words. But after more than an hour of talking about it, she finally understood what her son was trying to tell her and why he wanted to adopt the girls and become a large family in record time. "It's your way of honoring Carrie's memory, isn't it? She wanted to have many children and believed you would be a great father. I think by adopting those girls, you're trying to make up for the void Carrie left with her death and fulfill her last wish in life." "That's understandable, honey. If that's what you want, I'll help you. Bring them along. We'll try to give them the family they so desperately need," his mother told him, finally accepting his wish to adopt 6 sisters out of the blue. The next day, the orphanage management was very relieved when Richard confirmed that he really wanted to take the girls to live on his farm outside the city, and to prove that his wishes were honest, they asked him several questions to confirm that he was eligible to be their guardian. Of course, the answers to all these questions were satisfactory, and there was no problem with David becoming the sextuplets' adoptive father, not even the fact that he was a black man, widowed and living with his 60-plus-year-old mother on a farm. Apparently, he was the ideal candidate for the cursed sisters to have one last chance to have a family and to know the true love that only a home can give. "Good luck, Mr. Davis. You are a brave man," said the director, shaking his hand. "I don't need it, sir. Those girls will be very happy in my family. I'm convinced," he replied, winking and shaking his hand more firmly than necessary. And the truth is that Davis wasn't wrong. However, things didn't go as smoothly as he would have liked. His mother, Miranda, was excited to meet the girls and to start being a grandmother. She loved the children, and her son had already told her the story of the girls to make it easier for her to connect with them and understand their attitude. The woman felt their pain. She wanted to make them feel at home and comfort them. To her, the sextuplets were her lost granddaughters who had finally come home, and she was determined to raise them right and make them feel part of the Davis family. From the day the girls arrived home, Richard attended to all their basic needs and any additional needs his mother mentioned. He devoted himself entirely to his new mission as the father of 6 sisters, each one different and with her own concerns, but all similar in their beauty and their shy, withdrawn attitudes. As the months passed, and with a great deal of patience on everyone's part, the relationship between the girls and their new family improved until it became the closest thing to a home they had ever known. The turning point came when one of the sisters, Margaret, broke an antique vase that Miranda was very fond of. The little girl was very frightened when she saw what had happened and ran to hide in the farmhouse. When Miranda realized, she ran to look for the worried little girl and found her crying, hiding behind her son's tractor. Seeing the girl's reaction to breaking the vase, Miranda understood at once what was happening and wanted to calm her down. "Don't worry, honey. I'm not mad. It was just an old vase. We'll go buy a much nicer one," she said sweetly, holding out her hand to her. "You're not going to punish me? You're not going to send me back to the orphanage?" asked the girl, crying and trembling with fear. "Of course not. It was a simple accident, Margaret. No one is going to hurt you, and no one is going to send you back to the orphanage. We are your family. This is your home." And she hugged her tenderly. From that day on, both Margaret and her 5 sisters understood that Richard and Miranda were now their family, and that they would never again have to worry about returning to an orphanage. As time passed, each of the sisters began to find their place on the farm, and together they helped the family business to thrive. While some of the girls helped Miranda with the housework and cooking, the others learned from Richard how to grow flowers in the garden, work the land, and care for the animals. As there were 6 sisters, they were able to split up and help the work on the farm triple, thus increasing profits and the general welfare of all. But best of all, the girls really enjoyed participating in all these activities. They didn't do it grudgingly. They were overjoyed to be a part of their family and their project, and that warmed Richard and his mother's hearts. Everything began to go well in the lives of the 6 sisters, and Richard, after many, many years, felt his heart overflowing with love and gratitude once again. However, the surprises were not over for this family, and they still had one more hurdle to overcome, but this time they would do it all together. Over the years, the sextuplets proved to have a hidden talent that they had never before dared to show in public: singing. They all had a distinct and beautiful voice, which together became a choral song full of beauty, capable of captivating everyone. As soon as the director of the village choir heard the sextuplets sing, she wanted to recruit them and teach them professionally. The girls were thrilled to have a mentor to help them refine their technique. They loved singing together and were eager to see how far they could go as singers. And so it was that for several years, the choir director started signing them up to sing at all kinds of local events and festivals, even national competitions, and the girls kept practicing and constantly improving. Everyone loved them and were betting on a promising career for all of them. However, as they grew older and turned 19, some of the sisters did not share the same enthusiasm for music and decided that the state singing competition held each year in early summer would be their last performance together. After that, each would take a different path for their future. The prize money from the contest was very juicy, and both the sisters and Richard himself were interested in winning it, so they would never have to worry about the expenses of their daughters' respective college careers again. A wish they saw fulfilled when they performed in the contest and quickly became the favorites and easily won the victory and the prize money. However, the success the sextuplets achieved on the internet, thanks to the contest, brought with it the discovery of a dark secret that would once again make the happy life they had struggled to build for 10 years risk breaking apart. Within a week of winning the contest, the 6 sisters were showered with offers from different record labels. some of which were so interesting that the sextuplets began to seriously consider them. However, when one night a mysterious woman knocked on the door of the Davis farmhouse asking for the 6 sisters, all those dreams and future projects were forgotten. The woman who came looking for them claimed to be the girls' biological mother, and now demanded her share of the profits. At first, Richard thought it was a joke, and that this woman was just a desperate admirer. However, when the woman showed him a picture with her 6 babies in her arms on a hospital gurney, Davis could no longer deny it. "My name is Diana, and I am the mother of all 6 girls. I have more proof of what I say, if you don't believe me, but it seems to me that this photo is clear proof that what I say is true," the woman said coolly, holding the photo aloft in the doorway. The sisters were stunned to see their mother's face, so similar to their own. She was a young woman, but one whom life had not treated too well. She had dark circles under her eyes, and the clothes she wore were well worn. It was obvious that she needed money, and that seeing her 6 daughters succeed had seen an opportunity to solve her financial problems. Richard and Miranda finally agreed to let the woman in, but only out of respect for their daughters, and not because they really trusted her. Afterwards, Diana explained to them the whole story surrounding the birth of the girls and the reason why she had to abandon them in an orphanage. Diana was addicted to gambling and all sorts of things that are not worth mentioning. Not even while she was pregnant was she able to stop gambling and losing her money in casinos. Diana was in no condition to be the mother of 1 child, let alone 6 at the same time. The girl's father disappeared as soon as he found out he was going to be a father, and she didn't even bother to look for him, because he was as bad an influence on her daughters as she would have been. When she finished telling her story, Richard felt a mixture of pity and deep contempt for that woman. But deep down he felt grateful to her because, thanks to her, he had been able to meet his 6 daughters and create the family he had longed for so much. "You still don't love your daughters. You have come here to continue to ruin their life, am I wrong?" Davis reproached her. "They are my daughters, whether you like it or not, and as their mother, I have my rights," she started saying, very upset, but Richard didn't let her finish. "You lost the right to be their mother as soon as you decided to abandon them to go gamble in a casino. So don't even think about telling me what rights you have over them." Richard was furious, and Diana recoiled when she saw the farmer's reaction. Finally, after discussing it with his mother and seeing how upset her daughters were, Davis agreed to give her a check for a substantial amount of money so that the woman would disappear and never bother them again. He knew the money wouldn't last long, but he wanted to set a good example for his 6 daughters and decided to be lenient with someone who didn't deserve it. That was his way of making peace with fate and closing the sad story that had always surrounded his daughters. They never missed the one who was supposed to be their mother, because Richard had taught them what it really meant to have a family and a place where you are loved above all else. Do you like this touching and surprising story? If so, we invite you to leave us a comment expressing your opinion. If you want to continue enjoying inspiring stories like this one, subscribe to our channel or check out the other videos shown at the bottom of the screen. Thank you for your cooperation.